Welcome. In front of me is a Nokia G11, and today I'll go over unboxing along with a really quick overview of this device. So starting off, this is the packaging that it comes in. It's a little bit banged up here. Hopefully the phone inside as well. Pop it open. And the phone kind of seems a little bit loose in here. It's not even sitting well on the little placement here, but anyway, just pop it out. So here's the device. It looks like it has some kind of protection layer already pre-applied to the screen, so that's nice. Let's turn it on and get a look at the banged up little box here. So that's basically what we get in here. Some paperwork, a charging cable, type C to type A, and a charger, which is actually a surprise, though this one seems to be, a 10-watt charger. Wow, that's bad. So yeah, this charger really hurts my eyes. I'm just gonna get rid of it. Just get a cable. Let's just assume we get a cable, because that charger is embarrassing to include with your device. I'm pretty sure majority of us have a better charger at home with an old device, or if not better, probably roughly the same. It's 2022. 10 watts ain't gonna cut it. So yeah, now before I progress with any kind of specs and whatever, I'm gonna mention the price tag. So this is at above €100 price tag, so about 140, over $200. So it is a budget device, though it is a little bit on the higher end of the budget devices, and we will see, I guess, if this is a worth device. Now, personally, before I say anything bad or good about this device, I'll mention something, my thought process on budget phones. Just so anybody that will watch this, I guess, can kind of see where I am coming from. So for me, budget devices, at least I consider them to be kind of useless. I would prefer to buy a used phone, like a flagship, for basically the same price, but it will obviously outperform this, what you have right here, in almost every kind of way. That is usually the case. So I personally don't see a reason for budget phones. Obviously there are reasons for people, like having an actual warranty, or for people that don't know what they're looking for in a phone, they might get scammed. I do understand this. So what I consider to be best value for money might not apply to everybody, but that's kind of how I'm gonna be basing this phone, just for everybody to kind of see where I am coming from. So for about $200, obviously you can get a budget Samsung, not budget, what am I saying? A flagship old Samsung phone, like a Galaxy S8 or S7. Obviously it will work better than this, and it will have a lot of features that this phone will be lacking, just because it was a flagship. So they usually popped in there, like wireless charging and so on. So you might have a better experience with an old flagship rather than this, but like I mentioned, obviously old flagships will not have any kind of a warranty. So if you're worried that your device might break and you really want to have that warranty, that will not be an option for you. So there we go. So let's progress with this one now. So right off the bat, we're looking at 6.5-inch display. This is a 720 by 1600 resolution. So it is what you would expect from a budget device. Now, it is running an IPS LCD display, and surprisingly, it is actually running it at 90 Hz, which is higher than I would have expected it to be. So that's actually a decent positive. And also, I'll mention this right now, something that you will not expect from my old flagship devices, like I mentioned before, Samsung's. They did not push high refresh rates back in the day. So you will not be expecting any kind of higher refresh rate from like old flagships. Here we get a little bit of a higher one, though sometimes with budget devices, I don't know if that will be a good thing, considering budget phones might not be able to push this kind of refresh rate most of the time. So I guess I'll find out once I set up the device if this is kind of like lagging or not. Now, outside of that, we are looking at 81.6% screen to body ratio with 270 pixels per inch. So like I mentioned, more of the typical budget device display. And moving on to the actual performance right here, once we can see it, it is by default running the 90 Hz refresh rate. So that is actually really nice. Sometimes phones do tend to turn that off by default, which is kind of weird. You paid for a phone that has, for instance, higher refresh rate display, but yet the manufacturer by default turns it off and you have to go into the settings and turn it on. Here we have it on by default, so that's nice. And just flipping through the pages, settings. Flipping through the pages, the display looks well, or decent. It's not like nothing really weird popping out like a super budget display with smearing and stuff like that, ghosting problems. So this is looking fairly good. And also the performance, at least opening and closing, really smooth, surprisingly smooth. So now let's move over to the cameras. Let's flip it over and you can see a triple camera setup. Now, truth be told, we're only looking at one camera. We have the 13 megapixel main sensor. It's not really described if it's a wide, ultra wide or anything. I'm assuming it is going to be a wide sensor with a PDAF focusing mode. Now the two additional cameras below that are the 2 megapixel macro and 2 megapixel depth. Now in normal circumstances I would most certainly trash these cameras beyond belief, but when main sensor is only at 13 megapixels, which is already low even for a budget device, those cameras might have some validity here. Because 13 megapixel probably will not capture a better macro than the dedicated macro lens, even though it is only at 2 megapixels. When you're looking at something like a 30 megapixel sensor, then you can do a 2x zoom and capture a much better close-up shot of a subject, like what you would consider a macro shot, over the actual dedicated macro. And that obviously becomes more apparent the higher the megapixel count is on a camera, like 50, 100. You obviously can just zoom in closer and get a much closer image. For instance, like a plant, you can really get in there with a zoom instead of like having your phone really close up. Now let's just kind of show you what we're working here with. So photo mode, I'm gonna just capture the typical photo and also the macro, just so you can kind of see it. This is the normal one, and this is going to be the macro. You can just maybe capture this gravel, or whatever you want to call it. Okay, this looks like it's close enough. If I go any closer, I think it becomes blurry, or I don't think, I know it becomes blurry. So there we go. That's a macro. Right here, it is a little bit on the dimmer side, though I guess I might have been blocking a little bit of the light. And here is just the normal 13 megapixel wide shot. And as you can see, honestly, the difference between the macro, because you can get closer up in here, but in terms of quality, okay, the macro just has a tiny bit more quality, though it's not by much. Now, I think usually I would probably consider this to be an unfair comparison, but honestly at this point, Huawei Mate 20 Pro, which is what I use still as my main driver, such as a way of life in a third world country, I will consider this to be a fair comparison because the prices are roughly the same at this point. You can buy this phone used for basically the same price. So I'm gonna go into more. Normal photo mode obviously will be significantly better. Just kind of So here is the typical normal shot as a comparison. So in terms of colors, it's more accurate, it's better exposed. Overall, it just looks better. And then in terms of macro, here I don't have just macro, I have what they call, I guess, super macro. I'm not sure what's so super about it, but whatever. So here I need to kind of like deal with this because I can get actually way closer with this sensor than I could with the other one. So there we go. This is the macro shot, and you can kind of see the difference right here, especially when it comes down to quality. This is just not comparable. So performance wise, I think the Huawei would also be a more powerful device. The display right there looks nicer because it's a OLED display or AMOLED, one of those two. It won't have a high refresh rate, but obviously everything else in that phone will be better. So continuing with this one specifically, you already seen the camera performance. It's nothing staggering here. Then we have a couple of versions in terms of like storage capacity. So we have a 32 and 64, and depending which one you go for, you will also have two different RAM options. So 32 comes with only 3 gigs of RAM, which I would consider to be on a lower side. I would probably recommend going for the higher model, just because it comes with 64 gigs of storage and additionally 4 gigs of RAM. Now in here, I believe we can most likely expand the storage past the 6432, but what you can never expand is the RAM that the device comes with. Yeah, we can expand the storage. So that's why I recommend going for the higher end model, just because if you're planning to keep this phone around for like maybe over a year, you might really start to feel the 3 gigabytes of RAM as a real hinder to whatever you're trying to do. So I recommend you to go for the higher because of that. And finishing this off, couple features: 5000 mAh battery built in here, or a little bit over 5050. Side mounted fingerprint sensor on a power key, and basically doubles as a power and a fingerprint. Type-C as a charging, which in certain budget phones this might be a feature, because some of them do still include micro USB for some stupid reason. So it's nice that they decided to include an actual USB-C. And that's about all I can say about this device. Not much more to really say. It is a relatively bare-bone device, including just like the bare minimum as you would expect from a budget device. Though, like I mentioned, one thing that was surprising was the higher refresh rate of the display at 90 Hz. Now, at the end of the day, like I was saying before, most likely a older flagship device will be more powerful and probably even last longer in terms of how usable it is. I'm not saying if it breaks or anything like that. I'm just assuming if both of them work flawlessly, then flagships usually have more power that can also just last longer in terms of like comfortable usage, where your apps aren't loading for half a minute or the device isn't lagging. So that's kind of my overview here. This phone also is missing things like a 5G connectivity. If you're looking for that, obviously this phone does not have it at all. So the only kind of like newer feature that you get over, for instance, older flagship devices, or even like, I don't know, maybe last year's budget models, or even mid-rangers, which probably at this point would also come at the same price and most likely are still sold, so they will have also a warranty. You're getting just the higher refresh rate display, and that's about all you get extra on this phone. So there we go. Now at the end of the day, the choice is yours if you like this phone. If the performance for you is enough, and I don't know, maybe you're expecting to change it, or maybe you just want a cheap phone for the sake of not really caring if it breaks or anything like that. Seems to work well, so I probably would consider this to be the most important factor of the phone. Works well, the display looks okay, and it has a high refresh rate display, so that's also really kind of nice. But anyway, that being said, the phone comes at around about $200, so it is on a higher side of budget devices, kind of leaning closer towards like mid-rangers, so keep that in mind. But still, for the price, I feel like this phone is fairly competitively priced. It offers a decent amount of performance. From just like scrolling through it, it didn't lag or anything. It has a high refresh rate display, so I would say just for what we get here, it is fairly priced. So that being said, if you found this very helpful, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and thanks for watching.